She wasn't supposed to be in that boardroom. She wasn't even supposed to speak, but when a young hotel security guard interrupted a billion-dollar deal, one that could have bankrupted the company, no one was ready for what came next. This is the true story of a woman everyone overlooked. A girl from a forgotten town, with a brilliant mind hidden behind a black security uniform. She had no Ivy League degree, no corporate title, just a dream, and a secret she found buried deep in a folder no one else bothered to read. What she discovered could have destroyed everything, but she chose to speak, and in doing so she saved an empire and built her own. Stay with us, because by the end of this story you might just believe that sometimes the person no one listens to is the one who sees everything. If stories like this inspire you, take a second to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. You never know whose quiet courage we'll celebrate next. She grew up where hope went to rust, a fading town with empty factories and tired streets, where dreams didn't just die, they were never born, but somehow she had one. Even as a child, she would sit by the cracked window of her small room, flipping through old finance magazines her mother found at thrift shops. She didn't dream of fairy tales or weddings. She dreamed in numbers, profit margins, market trends, risk analysis. Wall Street wasn't just a place on a map to her. It was a vision, a mission, something sacred. Her name was Eliza Cole. While other kids played on dirt fields, Eliza sat cross-legged in the corner of the school library, reading investment case. Studies no one else understood. Teachers whispered about her intelligence, how she didn't belong there, in a town where high school was the finish line. But no one said it to her face. Her father. He said little. He was usually passed out in a recliner by 5 p.m., the television flickering in the background like a broken promise. Once a factory worker, then a bitter man with too many debts and too much bourbon in his blood. But her mother was different. Mara Cole had hands that knew hard work. She cleaned homes during the day, worked a diner at night, and never once complained. What she couldn't give Eliza in money, she gave in belief. "You're meant for more, baby," she would whisper, tucking her daughter in after midnight. "You don't belong in this town. You belong out there, where minds like yours change the world." And Eliza believed her. Every evening she studied with laser focus. Excel spreadsheets printed out on old paper, TED Talks downloaded to a phone. With a cracked screen, she saved every dollar she could, sold old clothes online, took weekend jobs babysitting, mopping floors, whatever it took. When college application season came, she didn't aim low. She applied to Columbia, Wharton, NYU Stern. She imagined the moment when the acceptance letters would come, when she'd frame them, when she'd cry in her mother's arms and say, "We made it," but the envelopes that arrived were thin, impersonal, brutal. "We regret to inform you," again and again and again. She sat on the porch the day the final rejection came, her knees pulled to her chest, the letter crumpled beside her. Her mother sat next to her in silence, handing her a warm mug of instant coffee, like it was the only thing she could still offer. "I guess I'm not what they're looking for," Eliza whispered. Her mother looked out toward the sinking sun. "No," she said softly, "they just don't know what they're missing yet." It wasn't the beginning Eliza dreamed of, but it wasn't the end either. She wiped her eyes and started looking for another way. The university she ended up at didn't have shiny brochures or recruiters in polished suits. No ivy-covered walls, no alumni networks pulling strings, just one dusty finance department, 3 overworked professors, and night classes filled with working adults chasing second chances. Eliza didn't complain. She knew her dream hadn't changed, just the route. So she studied harder than everyone else. She read textbooks cover to cover, sat in the front row every lecture, and asked questions that left even her professors pausing. But brilliance didn't pay bills. So by day, she worked. She wiped down gas station bathrooms at 6 a.m., then took the city bus to her shift at a local grocery store. On weekends, she picked up hours waitressing at a rundown diner, the same one her mother used to work at before arthritis took over her hands. She barely slept, but every time she thought about quitting, she pictured her mother's voice in the dark. "You don't belong here, you belong out there." After 4 years, she graduated with top honors. Her professors praised her drive. Her classmates whispered that she was destined for more, and for the first time in years, Eliza let herself believe it. She bought a new blazer, cheap but sharp, printed a stack of resumes, and walked into every interview like she had nothing to lose and everything to prove. But what she heard, over and over again, wasn't feedback. It was code. "We're looking for someone with a more traditional background. You don't quite fit the profile we're used to. We loved your story, but we've already filled the role." No one said it, but she heard it loud and clear. "You didn't go to the right school. You don't know the right people. You're not one of us." Months passed. Her savings disappeared. Her mother, the only person who kept her going, was getting sicker. She'd been hiding the doctor's bills, pretending the pain was just a little stiffness. Then the call came. An accident, a highway, rain, too fast, too late. Eliza collapsed in the hospital hallway. The woman who had believed in her when no one else had was gone. And just like that, the world went quiet. Her dream, her drive, the numbers she used to see with clarity, all of it blurred. She really tried, to send out more resumes, to get out of bed, to hope. But every day felt heavier, until one night she opened her refrigerator to find nothing but a half-empty bottle of ketchup and a single egg. No food, no job, no future. She walked down the street, her coat too thin, the city too cold, and when she passed the glowing windows of the Astoria Hotel, she saw a notice taped to the glass. Now hiring full-time security, no experience required. She tore the paper down, and without knowing it, walked into the building that would change everything. The Astoria Hotel was nothing like her world. Chandeliers that dripped with crystal, polished marble floors that never saw dust. Guests arrived in black cars and left in better ones, while staff moved like shadows, seen but never heard. And now, Eliza was one of them. Her uniform was stiff. The badge on her chest felt foreign. She was no longer the top of her class, no longer the girl with answers. She was a security guard, stationed at the lobby doors, tasked with smiling, standing still, and staying silent. She watched people walk in wearing designer suits, holding laptops filled with spreadsheets, taking calls about portfolios and capital markets. Every ping of the elevator felt like a slap. That could have been me, she thought. No, it should have been me, but thinking that way didn't pay rent. So she followed the routine. 45 a.m. Arrive. 7 a.m. Stand at post. 12 counter p.m. Lunch break in the staff kitchen, eating quietly beside housekeepers and janitors. 3 p.m. Rotate to the parking entrance. 11 p.m. Finish the last sweep, sign the report, go home. It wasn't glamorous, but it was work. Still, every night, lying on her second-hand mattress in a tiny studio apartment, the same question glowed at her. Was everything I fought for all for nothing? She thought of the lectures she once gave during class presentations, the complex models she built in Excel from scratch, the financial case studies she solved faster than anyone else. Now she was scanning IDs and checking maintenance logs. One night, her old classmate from university messaged her, "Hey, I just got hired as an analyst at Morgan Stanley. Drink soon?" She stared at the screen, the words stinging like acid. She didn't reply. She couldn't. not because she wasn't happy for him, but because it was a mirror of what could have been, had the world made just a little room for someone like her. She tried to find purpose in the job. She showed up early, stayed late, helped others without being asked. Even the head of hotel operations started to trust her. "Eliza always catches things others miss," he once said. It made her feel visible, but visible wasn't enough, because inside, her mind still buzzed with ratios, forecasts, risk assessments. The girl who once dreamed in numbers still lived inside her, whispering in the quiet moments, "You're not done. Not yet." And one evening, that whisper became a scream. The moment she found that folder, the folder no one was supposed to see, the folder that would change everything. It was close to midnight when it happened. The lobby was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that hums in your ears and makes every footstep echo. Eliza was doing her final rounds, moving through the executive floor with practiced efficiency. Most lights were off, most doors locked, except one. The boardroom door stood ajar. At first, she thought someone had forgotten to close it. She stepped in to check. Habit, nothing more. That's when she saw it. A thick, leather-bound folder lying open on the conference table, pages slightly fanned out under the table lamp's soft glow. Eliza should have walked away. It wasn't her place, not her business. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the bold logo at the top of the first page. Acquisition proposal, Haven Crest Grand. Maybe it was the columns of numbers that jumped out at her, like an old friend saying hello. She looked around. No one in sight. Her hand moved almost without permission. She picked it up. Cash flow statements, debt restructuring plans, EBITDA projections. It was everything. Raw, unfiltered data from the hotel the Astoria CEO was planning to acquire. She pulled up a chair. Just for 5 minutes, she told herself. Just a quick glance. 5 minutes became 10, then 20, then the entire night. She forgot the clock. She forgot the rules. She forgot she was just a security guard because the numbers weren't adding up. Not just minor errors, strategic manipulation. Revenue that looked too clean. Expenses that were strangely consistent. Off-balance sheet liabilities disguised as vendor agreements. Ratios adjusted just enough to impress, but not enough to be honest. It wasn't a hotel preparing for growth. It was a house of cards, wrapped in glossy paper, and if the Astoria CEO moved forward with the deal, he wouldn't just be overpaying, he'd be buying a financial time bomb. Eliza sat back in the chair, heart pounding. She knew what she was seeing. These weren't mistakes. They were traps, crafted to look like opportunity, designed to ensnare someone who didn't read between the lines. She closed the folder gently, returned it exactly as she'd found it. Then she walked out of that room as the sun began to rise. But something had changed. For the first time in years, she wasn't haunted by failure. She was consumed by purpose. There was a storm coming, and she was the only one who saw the sky turning dark. Now came the real question. Would anyone listen to her? The next morning, Eliza stood outside the executive office floor, heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. Her security badge suddenly felt like a weight she didn't deserve to wear. She adjusted her collar, swallowed hard. This was insane. She was a guard, a name on a schedule, a face most people barely registered as they stepped into elevators. And now she was about to tell the CEO, the man who ran the entire hotel, that he was walking into a multi-million-dollar trap. She tried going through the usual chain of command. First, she approached her supervisor. He smiled politely, shrugged, and said, "Eliza, this isn't your lane. Just do your rounds, okay?" She tried again. Head of staff, assistant to the financial controller, even the operations director, same response every time. "Not your place. Let the experts handle it. You've misunderstood." But she hadn't misunderstood. She knew exactly what she saw, and so, with her chest tightening and her pulse in her ears, she walked to the assistant at the front of the CEO's office. "I need 5 minutes with Mr. Halbrook." she said. The woman behind the desk looked up, clearly amused. "I'm sorry." "You are?" "Eliza. I work security. I have information about the Haven Crest acquisition, financial information." There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable pause, then a scoff. "Mr. Halbrook is very busy. I understand. Just 5 minutes, that's all I need." Some part of her must have sounded convincing, because after a moment the assistant sighed, picked up the phone, and murmured something into the receiver. She hung up. "You've got 5 minutes. Don't waste them." The door opened. Eliza stepped into a world of glass, leather, and polished wood. The CEO, Grant Halbrook, sat behind a massive desk, skimming emails on a tablet. He didn't look up right away. "All right," he said without emotion. "You have 5 minutes." Eliza took a breath and began. She didn't stumble. She didn't ramble. She spoke like a surgeon wielding a scalpel, precise, deliberate, and sharp. "Sir, I reviewed the financials of Haven Crest Grand. There are inconsistencies in the revenue recognition timeline. Debt is disguised under non-operating vendor contracts, and their adjusted EBITDA figures rely on unsustainable occupancy projections." Halbrook's head tilted. Now she had his attention. She pressed on, flipping her own notes from memory, walking him through leverage ratios, long-term liabilities masked in footnotes, and why the acquisition, though appealing on paper, was a carefully dressed corpse. "Sir, this isn't a deal. It's a trap. If you go through with this, you'll be buying their losses and inheriting their cover-ups. The numbers aren't just misleading, they're engineered." Halbrook leaned back, silent for a long moment. "Your security?" he finally asked, eyebrows raised. "Yes, sir," Eliza replied without blinking. "And you figured all this out last night?" "Yes." He stared at her like he was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't fit. Then, almost reluctantly, "Sit down." What followed was not 5 minutes. It was 5 hours. He asked questions. She answered. He challenged her. She countered. She wrote out formulas on a whiteboard. She quoted audit frameworks. She cited regulatory cases. By the time she finished, the sun had moved across the sky and the room was awash in golden light. Halbrook stood in silence, tapping his fingers against the armrest of his chair. "I'm not saying I believe you," he said slowly. "But if even half of what you've said is true, I'm about to walk into something dangerous." Eliza didn't smile. She didn't beg. She simply nodded. "All I ask is that you check the numbers yourself, sir. Ask your experts. And if I'm wrong, I'll go back to my post and never speak of this again." Halbrook picked up the phone. "Get Collins and Alvarez in here. Now." Eliza stood. She wasn't dismissed, but she knew her time was up. As she turned to leave, Halbrook's voice stopped her. "Miss Cole, was it?" "Yes, sir." He studied her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Let's see if you're as smart as you think you are." She walked out the door, adrenaline still racing, unsure if she'd just ended her career or saved someone else's. 3 days passed. Eliza expected the silence. She'd delivered a bombshell, one that could shake an entire acquisition to the core, and then walked right back to her post like nothing happened. No one called. No one asked for her. No one looked at her differently. The lobby clocks ticked, elevators dinged, guests came and went, and Eliza stood still in uniform, wondering if she had imagined the whole thing. Maybe she had crossed a line. Maybe she was wrong. But then, late on the 3rd afternoon, her radio crackled. "Eliza Cole. Report to executive level, CEO's office." Her heart jumped. She rode the elevator up in silence, watching the numbers climb like a countdown. When she stepped into the reception area, the CEO's assistant stood up, not with amusement this time, but respect. "He's expecting you." Inside, Grant Halbrook stood by the window, arms crossed, his face unreadable. On the table behind him lay a thick stack of papers, annotated, highlighted, filled with sticky notes. He didn't look up at first. "Then you were right," Eliza blinked. "Sir?" "Every word. My analysts reviewed your concerns. Then I had outside counsel run an independent audit. Haven Crest cooked the books. artificially inflated revenue, deferred liabilities hidden under maintenance contracts, and those occupancy projections. He turned, eyes narrowed. They were pure fiction. He stepped closer. Had I gone through with that deal, I'd be buying a disaster. A shiny shell with termites under every floorboard. We'd be taking on close to 30 million in unaccounted debt. He let out a bitter chuckle. I was about to sign the purchase agreement next week. Eliza didn't speak. She didn't trust her voice. You saved this company, he said simply, and you saved me, because if this deal had gone through, and it all unraveled, which it would have, I'd be the one everyone blamed. The board, the shareholders, the press. He looked at her fully now. You saw what none of my people saw, what none of my advisors saw. You saw the truth. She opened her mouth, barely able to form the words. I just followed the numbers, sir. Exactly. He gave a small, incredulous smile. You didn't care about the narrative. You cared about the math, and the math never lies. He walked over to his desk and picked up a folder. Here's what's worse, he continued. Last night, I got a call from one of Havencrest's junior accountants. He's come forward. Whistleblower. The company's under internal investigation now. SEC might get involved. He paused. This whole thing is about to explode. Eliza felt the floor shift under her feet, not from fear, from confirmation. Everything she had seen, everything she feared, was happening, and she had stopped it. I owe you more than an apology, Halbrook said. I owe you a future. She raised her eyes. Sir, he smiled, I'm not going to let your talent rot behind a lobby desk. Not for another minute. He placed the folder in her hands. Open it. She did. Her eyes widened. Inside, a formal job offer. Director of Financial Risk and Strategy, Astoria Group. Salary, title, team, full executive benefits. Her name printed in bold. This isn't charity, he added. This is recognition. Long overdue. You belong in that boardroom, Eliza, not outside guarding the door. For a long moment she couldn't speak. All she could do was nod, holding back the tears that were rushing up too fast to stop. After all the years of rejection, exhaustion, loss, someone finally saw her, not just for who she was, but for what she was capable of. She took a deep breath and stepped into the future she'd built for herself, one number at a time. Within weeks, the headlines hit like thunder. Havencrest Grand. Under federal investigation for financial fraud, SEC launches probe into multi-million-dollar accounting scandal. Luxury hotel chain faces collapse amid whistleblower claims. The news spread through the industry like wildfire. Bankers pulled their funding, partners withdrew their offers, shareholders demanded answers. And the once glowing facade of Havencrest crumbled into a scandal-ridden wreckage. Eliza watched it all unfold, quietly. Behind the scenes, forensic accountants confirmed everything she had flagged, and more. Hidden debts, falsified occupancy rates, off-the-books liabilities. They called it one of the most elaborate hospitality fraud schemes of the decade. Grant Halbrook, meanwhile, was praised for pulling out just in time. Journalists asked him in interviews, "What made you take a second look?" He never gave the full story. He simply said, "Sometimes the smartest insight comes from the last person you'd expect." Inside the company, word began to spread. The new director of financial risk was not a Wall Street veteran, not a partner's niece, not Ivy League groomed. She was the former security guard who had saved them from catastrophe. At first, there were raised eyebrows, whispers in elevators, cold shoulders in early meetings, but that didn't last long, because Eliza didn't walk into her new role with arrogance. She walked in with preparation. She knew the quarterly numbers before anyone else did. She asked the right questions, sharper, deeper and more forward-thinking than the analysts around her. She didn't play politics, she played probabilities. She didn't posture, she predicted, and she was rarely wrong. Grant Halbrook watched her rise with quiet satisfaction. He gave her space, but always had her back. Over the next 18 months, Eliza led a full internal audit of Astoria's financials, streamlining operations, identifying underperforming properties, restructuring risk portfolios. What she delivered wasn't just order, it was vision, and then came the next deal. Another hotel, this time in Miami. Bright numbers, beautiful beachfront property, eager sellers. The team was excited. Halbrook was cautious. He turned to Eliza. "Run the numbers," he said. She did. And once again, she saw what others didn't. This time, though, the fraud wasn't there. The opportunity was real, and the deal was good. It closed within months and turned into one of the most profitable acquisitions in Astoria's history. That was the turning point. From that day forward, no one doubted her again. Eliza had gone from overlooked to irreplaceable, from lobby post to executive suite, from invisible to invaluable. But even as she rose, she never forgot what it felt like to be ignored, to be seen but not heard. And that's why she made a quiet promise to herself. No talent under her leadership would ever go unseen. No sharp mind would be buried under a cheap uniform, and no one would ever have to knock twice to be heard. Chapter 8. The Dream Fulfilled. The boardroom was silent. Sunlight streamed in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow on the polished table where executives sat, listening intently. At the head of the room stood Eliza. No longer in a uniform, no longer a quiet shadow on the sidelines. She was now Eliza Cole, Chief of Strategic Finance, and every word out of her mouth held weight. She clicked to the next slide of her presentation. An acquisition proposal for a chain of boutique hotels in the Pacific Northwest. She didn't just walk the team through the numbers, she told the story behind the data, trends, risk clusters, long-term growth, ROI projections so thoroughly modeled, even the skeptics nodded. When she finished, the room broke into applause, not because they were being polite, but because they knew she saw the whole chessboard. After the meeting, the CEO pulled her aside. "That was flawless," Grant said, smiling. "I couldn't have done it better myself." She smiled back. "You don't pay me to be second best." Laughed. "No, I pay you to make sure I still have a company to run." It had been almost 6 years since the night she stumbled into that open folder. Since then, Eliza had led 5 successful acquisitions, doubled Astoria's operating margin, and built a team of analysts, many of whom came from backgrounds like hers. Overlooked, underestimated, unpolished, but brilliant. She had created a culture where potential mattered more than pedigree, where merit didn't require permission. In the years that followed, she turned down offers from hedge funds, investment firms, even Wall Street giants. People who once wouldn't read her resume now tried to lure her away with 7-figure salaries. She said no, because she didn't need Wall Street to feel whole. She had built something better, and outside of work, her life had blossomed too. She bought a small house on the edge of the city, modest, full of light, with a garden her mother would have loved. Every Sunday, she taught financial literacy. Classes at a community center downtown. She never mentioned her title. She just said, "I used to be where you are." And the young women, some in tears, some skeptical, sat a little straighter, held their pens a little tighter, because she didn't talk like a boss. She talked like a survivor. One evening, after finalizing another acquisition deal, Eliza lingered, alone in the office. She poured herself a cup of coffee, walked to the window and looked out over the city. For a long time, she had wondered whether she'd ever belong, whether her dreams had a place in the real world. Now she knew. She hadn't just found her place, she had built it. Her story wasn't one of luck. It was one of vision, of resilience, of choosing to speak up when no one was listening. And because she did, she changed not just her own future, but the futures of everyone who would come after her. If you've stayed with us until now, thank you. And if you've ever felt like the world didn't see your worth, remember this. Sometimes the right person just needs one open door, and sometimes you're the one who kicks it open. Like, share, and subscribe if this story moved you. Because the world needs more voices like hers, and maybe yours.